Good morning. It is Friday, the 25th of July, 2025. The time, of course, is 10 past tomorrow. And this morning, I'd like to talk about something that someone said to me this week, which was, I have stopped using AI because I read that it's shrinking our brains. Now, quite honestly, I hear a variation of that a couple of times a week. Whether it's a client workshop, Q&A, or a question I get when I'm speaking on stage. And the question's always delivered with a mix of kind of suspicion, a little bit of panic, and usually with kind of a nervous laugh tacked on for good measure. So here's my short answer for you to frame things up, and I can't be clearer on this. No, generative AI is not melting your mind. But I'd like to unpack in this video essay why that myth has taken hold and how you can use AI tools to upgrade, not downgrade, your thinking. So we've got to start with that Apple study, which you may well have seen on your social media feeds over the last 6 weeks or so. To give you a timestamp, last month, which is June 2025, if you're watching this in the future, Apple released an EEG study, EEG being brainwaves study. So the study tested participants who had to do a piece of writing, and they either got to use ChatGPT or Google Search to do their research and help them with the writing. And then they were retested later to see which group retained more knowledge about the topic they were asked to write about. And then, so the Apple researchers made a pretty bold concluding claim about this, which was participants who used ChatGPT for a writing and recall task showed decreased brain activity compared to those using Google Search. And that's the key term, decreased brain activity. And that, of course, started a tidal wave of LinkedIn posts and X posts with headlines about brain rot. That's become a term. And that, of course, ChatGPT destroys your brain. All of those posts, of course, were written by people who only really read the headline of the study and not the study itself. Because if you read the study, what it actually said was that participants using ChatGPT showed lower overall brain activation, especially in the regions tied to effortful cognitive processing, compared to those using Google Search. The researchers then made a big jump, and they implied that this might suggest users were becoming mentally passive, in their words. And so there's a few weak points to that argument and to the research, and they're all really big ones, and the scientific community spoke out really quickly about the flaws in Apple's research methodology and the conclusions that the study came to. Those, of course, weren't picked up by the doom scrollers writing about brain rot, right? But so first of all, the study was based on a tiny sample. There was 30 participants, originally 54, but only 30 came back for retesting, and they were all university students. And the study didn't actually test any learning outcomes. All it did was measure brain activity. And so then it was conflating, and this is a huge jump, conflating brain activity with brain function, reduced brain function. So you don't have to be a neuroscientist to see that's a pretty big and shaky leap. Because like even when I first read the Apple study, and I'm not an academic, not a researcher, not a neuroscientist, but the first thing I thought was, surely lower brain activity during a task could actually signal that your brain is being more efficient. And in my opinion, that's exactly what you'd expect to see from AI, which is designed to help us reduce mental load, but not reduce our IQ. So I've actually been thinking on this theme for a few years now about how AI is changing how we think, the way we think. And so my ideas really crystallized recently after reading two really excellent pieces on this topic, both of which actually helped me form my ideas for this video essay. I highly recommend them. The first is by Ethan Mollick and his wife Lilac. It's called Against Brain Damage. And the second is by a university educator / AI commentator. His name is Nick Potkalitsky. And I'll give links to both of those articles, essays, underneath this video so you can read them if you like. So the first one, written by the Molochs, showed that the Apple study wasn't proof of brain harm, right? It was proof of brain efficiency, which is kind of what I was getting at. Your brain also, like the parallel is, your brain also shows reduced activity when you use a calculator instead of getting out a pen and paper and doing long division. But that doesn't mean you've lost the ability to think or your brain has been damaged. And then Nick Podkolitsky also put it really well in his article, which is called Brain Rot Isn't Real, but Cognitive Offloading Is. And he said the Apple study wasn't about brain death, it was about cognitive debt. Cognitive debt meaning we need to be careful what we offload to AI, right? So, because when you're using AI, you're outsourcing certain mental tasks so that you can focus on more important ones. And this is another parallel I've heard described, it's like doing the washing, right? You outsource your washing to a washing machine so you can spend time doing bigger, better, more important things, but not because you've fundamentally lost the ability to clean your clothes by hand. So I think of it like this, and this is a simple mental model that's helped a lot of people I work with reframe how they use AI and how they think about AI. This seems to stick because it's not technical, it's just clear and simple. It's called the 3 layers of cognition. I can't remember who I lifted this framework from, but rest assured it's definitely not my thinking. It's far too good for that. But the 3 layers of cognition suggests that you have remembering, you have reasoning, and you have creating. Possibly oversimplified, but it works well with this theme. So remembering, reasoning, creating. And the interesting thing is that generative AI actually supports all 3 layers of those cognition, but in different ways. Like it excels at the remembering layer because it can call on all of those facts and summaries and definitions and examples that it has from its huge data training process when it was made. But it also, used well, AI has a really powerful supporting role in our reasoning and our creating, of course, depending on how you use it. And that's the important part. What matters is not whether AI can do these things, but whether you stay actively engaged mentally as it does those things. So, and if you do that, if you use it well, it doesn't replace your thinking. It expands what you're thinking, the places your thinking can get to. And so here's where we're getting into the crux of things, because the way I see it, the real danger of AI is becoming an autopilot user of AI. And that's where things go sideways, right? And again, going back to the Molochs essay, they outline a really key behavior to avoid, and I agree 100% with this. The danger is letting the AI do your thinking before you've started the task. i.e., if you lead with a prompt instead of leading with your thinking about the problem, you fall into what is being called the anchoring trap, which is when you become reactive to the AI's suggestion rather than shaping the AI's thinking yourself. So to get around like falling asleep at the wheel with AI, the important part is do the task yourself first, or do the key thinking for it, especially if it's, even if it's rough thinking, or actually especially if it's rough thinking. Map out your thoughts, your objectives, your direction. And I'm doing this because that's how I do it. I map out with a pen and paper, but you can map out mentally as well. Map out what do you think about the topic, about the task, about the objective, and what do you think the direction is to get there? And then you let the AI build on that, right? So your prompt includes your initial thinking, brainstorming, direction, structure, and then you bring the AI in, and that gets you to the first draft. You get your first draft back from the AI, and then you repeat that process. You do some more reflecting, critiquing, analyzing, refining, gets you to the second draft, and then you let the AI loose again, so on and so on. And so that's what I suggest, and it's actually what I do myself. In fact, it's how I write the scripts for these video essays. So yes, I have a custom GPT that I've built that guides me in harmony with, I use the O3 model in some places and the 4.0 in other places while I'm writing these scripts. And the custom GPT takes me through a process of analyzing the source content that I give it. In this case, those 2 articles that I'm linking to you below. And then it synthesizes it with my own thoughts and perspectives, because at key parts through the custom GPT, the way I've designed it is it takes me through a process, like it interviews me exhaustively about my own thoughts on that topic and what I think are the key points that relate to my audience of senior business leaders and knowledge workers. And then it helps me, I've asked it because of the way I've written the prompt in the back, it helps me explore ideas that I may not have thought of myself. And so in that process, I take the source content, I take my ideas, and I take the AI guiding exploration to prompt me to think in different ways. And the custom GPT even tells me, when I've finished the first draft, it says, okay, leave this alone, Mark, come back in 24 hours and we'll do the second draft. And it does that again after I've done the second draft. It tells me, go away for 24 hours. And so the end result is that these scripts for these videos, they actually take me about 36, sometimes 48 hours of back and forth with my AI assistant to go from a rough brainstorm to a shape of what I want to say, to a refined version, and then a really polished, finished product. So you tell me if that's lazy and if my brain is wasting away every time I run that process. Because I think, actually, if we're being really honest, and this is a big point for me, we can actually name this tension with AI. From what I've observed over the past few years, many people's discomfort with AI often has less to do with the tools themselves, and it's more about this pretty embedded belief we've got that if something doesn't look hard to do or feel hard to do, then it's not the work's not worth much, right? And maybe just examine your own thinking when you're using AI. It can accelerate your productivity so much that sometimes you think, that wasn't as hard as it used to be. So is this worth as much as it used to be? It's a subconscious thought, but it's likely there. And I think we've inherited this from like the hustle culture of the last 40 years, since the 80s. Office surveillance, managers watching how hard is this person working. And actually, if you go back further, we've probably had, at least in the Western world, centuries of equating effort with value. And so I noticed that when AI helps us produce something faster, very often people question its legitimacy. And that's not because the result is poor, but it's because it didn't come wrapped in like a visible mental struggle. Sometimes people are aware of this and they can articulate it, though pretty curiously, I notice often it's not until I verbalize this subconscious belief that people have a light bulb moment and they realize that subconsciously that's what they're struggling with. And this returns me full circle back to the Apple study. What if the ease of AI isn't laziness? What if it's cognitive efficiency? And so that would signal it's time for us, and I say us, society, to break that link, that equating mental friction and mental struggle with the value and the worth of our work. So to start to wrap up, my advice is stop treating AI as an oracle, if you are. Use it as a creative partner. And yes, AI will absolutely make a whole generation of people who are predisposed to laziness super lazy. I don't shy away from that. But for those who choose to use it as a cognitive partner, I can see it will give those people superpowers to engage in higher level, more meaningful, valuable, and satisfying work. I've got no doubt about that either. So your brain is not under attack from AI. If anything, it's being upgraded. If you use the tools with curiosity, intent, strategy, I don't think you're eroding your brain. I think you're giving it space to expand. So I highly recommend reading both of the articles that inspired this video. I'll put the links below to the Moloch's Against Brain Damage and Nick Podkolitsky's Brain Rot Isn't Real. And then when you're ready to test this for yourself, try that process if you're not already. Think, draft, prompt, refine. Use that method, and if you're brave, share the results in the comments below or with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear how your brain is growing as a result.